Hello, welcome to your week 6 lecture video. This week we're going to look at hyperlinks and lists. So we're going to look at what hyperlinks are, relative and absolute URLs and internal and external links. We're going to look at lists, ordered lists, unordered lists, and definition lists. We're going to look at the viewport tag and the navigation and main tag. And we're going to layer all of these into our website that we've been creating so far in this week's lab. So hyperlinks, or links as they're more commonly known, are one of the basic blocks of the internet, the basic building blocks of the internet. They allow you to link or jump from one document to another document or another place within that document, or even another website entirely. The URLs that you display in hyperlinks could be absolute or relative paths, and we're going to look at that in a minute. They could also be internal or external links. Absolute URLs work similar to the way absolute path names do in Linux, which we learned a few weeks ago, right? They describe an absolute path name to a resource on the internet. And they usually begin with either http:// or https://. There's other protocols that are accessible through a web browser though, like FTP as well, which you commonly use for downloading files from an FTP server, not uploading. Absolute URLs are commonly used in links that point to external resources, which we're going to look at that in a second. Now, relative URLs, they work a lot like relative paths in Linux. They're relative to where the page exists. These are commonly used when linking to other pages within your website. And this allows you some flexibility. As long as the parent directory structure doesn't change or is consistent in your development environment and your production environment, then the website's going to work, as long as you're using relative paths. This is why we use them. Now, for our purposes, you can think of your development environment as your PC or your desktop, your laptop, whatever it is you're working on, right? If you're using GitHub Codespaces, that's your development environment. And that directory structure, whether it's locally on your PC or you're using GitHub Codespaces, is going to match exactly what's in GitHub, right, in the GitHub repo. And that's going to match exactly the same directory structure that we're going to use on the web server, from the parent directory down, anyway. So as long as that's the same, everything we develop for this course is going to work if you use relative URLs. It's a good thing. Now, you can also have internal and external hyperlinks. Internal hyperlinks are links that point to other pages or resources within your website. Commonly, you'll use these to create a navigation bar, which is exactly what we're going to do in this week and next week's labs, Labs 6 and 7 respectively. Internal hyperlinks tend to use relative URLs, which makes them easier to port between development and production environments, which I just kind of finished explaining, right? External hyperlinks are links to other websites. And this is one of the abilities that contributed to the internet's rise in popularity in the 90s. Because you can create a hyperlink to any existing website on the internet without any restriction and consequence. And people use these all the time. You, I guarantee, have used these. And you didn't know what they were. Now you know what they are. I skipped too far. So that's links. Now we're going to look at lists, and we're going to combine these together in the lab. Lists are used a lot when you're writing web content. They're preferable to a comma-separated list in a web page because reading from a digital device, such as a screen or a smartphone, well, they're screens, right, is about 25% slower than reading from traditional print-based formats, paper-based formats. And there's 3 different types of lists, and I think we're going to use 2 of them if I remember correctly. I wrote the lab, but I can't remember. Ordered lists, unordered lists, and description lists. Ordered lists open with the OL tag. It's easy to remember because OL, ordered list, right? It's kind of right there. The items within the list are referred to as list items, and they're made up or they use the LI tag. List items are decorated with numbers by default in an ordered list, and you can change that through CSS. So you just get 1, 2, 3, but you can make that upper or lowercase Roman numerals. You can make that letters. There's a few different options through CSS, which we're not going to learn this week. Ordered lists are used when you want to put the items in a particular order. Like, here's the top 10 reasons why my professor is awesome. Probably not what you're putting in your webpage, right? Here's an example of an ordered list. So we see we have the OL tag and the closing OL tag, and then we have 3 list items, first, second, and third. Now it's common when you're writing HTML to indent all of the list items one tab or one indent. If you use spaces over tabs, whatever, that's a whole debate. It's a common practice. You could technically put them all on one line, and if you call me over and ask me to look at your code, I'm just not looking at it, right? Now, call me over and ask me to look at your code is a little bit different because this is an online course. I'm not coming to your computer, but you might be sharing your screen or something. Unordered lists open with the UL tag, and they work pretty much exactly the same as ordered lists other than that one thing. The big difference is your list items are decorated by with bullets by default, but it still uses the LI tag just like an ordered list. So if you know how one works, you know how the other works. And you can modify that decoration by default. You can change the bullet type to a whole bunch of different things, even a small image, which you don't commonly do, but you could. These are used when you're presenting items in no particular order. So here's an example of an ordered list. We have opens with the UL tag, closes with the UL tag. We have our indented block of our list items, and we have, in this example, Windows, Linux, and Mac. In no particular order, these are the operating systems I like. In a particular order, using an ordered list, Linux would probably be at the top of the list for me. So that's ordered and unordered lists, and we're going to use those in this week's lab. Now, description lists open with the DL tag, and they work a little bit different. They're useful when you're listing terms on a web page. So you have descriptions and their term. Description lists are made up of 2 different types of tags, unlike ordered and unordered lists. The DT tag, which stands for description term, and the DD tag, which stands for description definition. And here's an example of a description list. So we have our opens with a DL, closes with a DL. I put a couple Marvel characters in here because, well, let's have some fun, right? So we've got Thor, and we've got a description of who Thor is, Iron Man, and we've got a description of who Iron Man is, right? So those are the 3 types of lists that you're going to use and encounter in web design. Hopefully that all makes sense. Let's look at viewports. So the viewport is a modifier to the meta tag, which we've already looked at the meta tag, right? And this will tell the browser how to scale the page for different size displays. It's an important element for responsive web design, which makes your web page automatically resize based on the type of device that it's being viewed on. There was once a point in time where you developed for how it looked on a desktop, and mobile was an afterthought. That point in time died a long time ago, like 10 plus years ago. If you're not developing your website with both views in mind now, you're not doing it right. So we're gonna have a lot of mobile friendly, or as it's known, responsive design in our website, because that's the correct way to do it. You can set the viewport scale to 1.0 using the following code here. So we've got a meta tag, name equals viewport, and then content, width equals device width, initial scale 1.0. And just adding that single line to your code will make your web page look so much better on a mobile device than it did before. Just one line. Now there's a lot more we can do with CSS, and we're going to look at that next week. Next up, navigation bars. So these are common features on websites. You've used them, right? They tie your site together. They allow you to navigate from one page to another and back again. And they're commonly aligned either across the top or to the right side of the page. You can align them to other places too, it's just not commonly done. You can have them across the bottom, and you could have them across the left side. They're commonly across the left side. That should say left side. I got confused when I wrote that. I'll fix it later. Your navigation bar could have drop-down menus as well. We're not going to do drop-down menus next week, just throwing it out there, but it could. The nav tag is used to define which elements of your web page make up your navigation bar. And the display options for that, such as your colors, positioning, and everything to do with how it looks and works, is done in CSS, which we're going to learn next week. We're just doing the framework for your navigation bar that we're going to modify how everything looks with CSS. Users should be able to easily tell by looking at your navigation bar where they currently are, where they can go, and how they can get back to where they just were, or to another page, right? And a side note, or an additional note, navigation items should not change position when you browse from one page to the next, because that's not a good navigation bar. You want everything in the same order on every single page. So you need to think about structuring that correctly when you're laying it out in HTML, and that's what we're going to do this week. Here's a sample navigation bar, and this is just the HTML portion only. So we've got our nav. There's a few different ways of doing navigation bars. We're going to use the method that uses an unordered list. So within our nav, we've got an unordered list, and within that we have our list items, which have relative hyperlinks to internal documents within our website. This is the text that's going to display for each item in our navigation bar, but this is how it works. This is all of the HTML you need to create a navigation bar. Isn't that awesome? I think it's awesome. Pretty much everything else is done in CSS, and the CSS for a navigation bar is pretty extensive. We're going to do that next week. And last up, we've got the main tag. I think it's last up anyway. So this defines the main content area of your web page. This is used so you can identify it separately from the navigation bar, and you can make things look better using CSS. You could have additional structural elements, such as a footer as well. So we're just going to use the main page and stick it around everything except for our navigation bar. And here's how it works, right? Within our body, we've got our main, and then here's our web page. So, in Lab 6 this week, you're going to create an unordered list for your navigation bar. You're going to add hyperlinks to it. Then you're going to add the nav tag. Then you're going to add the main tag. And then you're going to use or add the viewport meta tag to make it a bit responsive. And you're going to make it even better next week in Lab 7 when we learn all the CSS to create a responsive navigation bar. So, I will see you in the next video. Take care, be safe, have a great day. Bye for now.